met a few of you already today, but let me take a minute to introduce myself. I'm Natile. I'm currently a stay-at-home mother, and my son, Jacob, is 2.5 years old. I moved to Connecticut about 3 years ago. Before that, I was in Morgantown, West Virginia, where I got my degree in psychology, and I worked at a nonprofit mental hospital for several years. During that time, I learned a lot about advocating for those who are unable to advocate for themselves. Shortly after my husband accepted a job here in Connecticut, we found out that I was pregnant. I grew up in a home with a mentally ill mother, and my father worked several jobs just to provide for my siblings and I. I was very much terrified of being a poor mother. I knew I would need a lot of support. Luckily, my long-distance family was able to provide a lot of that for me, and we were soon welcoming our perfect little boy into the world. Jacob was very healthy and happy, and we really learned what we needed as a family as we went. So Jacob was meeting almost every milestone on time. He was even doing things early, like crawling. He kind of skipped, so he went straight to walking by like 6 months. By age 1, we really only had one concern. He really was kind of delayed in his vocalization. He wasn't really babbling. He only said like mama and dada occasionally, usually dada, because apparently kids like to say dada first. And he really didn't mimic us when we were speaking to him. So we got a hearing test done just to make sure that he was physically okay. And after that came back normal, a family member recommended that we get a developmental assessment done. So we talked to our pediatrician, and luckily he sent in a referral for Birth of 3 to come out and visit us. So in July, Jacob was just over 18 months, and Kid Steps sent in a 2-person team to visit us in our home. They had a huge bag of toys, and immediately one of the members sat down on the floor and started playing with my son, and the other one walked through all the paperwork, and she was also there to document everything that they needed to keep track of for Jacob's milestones. Jacob had absolutely no idea that this was an evaluation. He just thought it was something new to play with. He was much more comfortable than if we had brought him to a clinic situation, and he was really just beyond what we had seen him do before. So he was playing with things that we've never seen him do before. He was battling a little bit, and he was really interacting with the toys and the workers. Towards the end of the evaluation, they told us that Jacob was eligible for services with Kid Steps because of his speech delay. And they also noted that he was not really making eye contact or responding to his name. So what they recommended was that we work with one of their members for a couple months, and if he didn't progress in those areas, we would get an autism evaluation completed. So over the next few months, we started working with an occupational therapist a couple times a month, every few weeks or so. And during that time, Jacob progressed beautifully. He was progressing well physically, and he was even starting to babble more. So we were very, very encouraged with his progress. But we were still a little bit worried with his verbal and social skills just being a little bit delayed still. So we did do the autism evaluation last October. So this was about when Jacob was 22 months old. The autism evaluation was done by an expert from a different agency, but our Kid Steps worker really wanted to help support us, so she came as well. Again, we were very optimistic because Jacob was making better eye contact. He even responded to his name when we said it, but not the expert. This evaluation was also much more focused on his socialization skills and not just his physical milestones. We were completely floored when the expert diagnosed my son autistic level 2. So my mind went completely blank. I remember turning to my husband and seeing him crying silently beside me. And the first thoughts that finally made their way into my mind was, what did I do wrong? This is all my fault. I barely remembered any of the information from my college studies or any of my time working with autistic adults. The evaluator explained a bit about the autism diagnosis in itself and what we might expect for Jacob in the future. She also recommended that Jacob start a more intensive program specifying in autism, and that we would be given some time to decide which program we wanted to enroll him in. After she left, our KidSteps worker notably saw us crying and really encouraged us that we weren't bad parents, this wasn't our fault, and that Jacob was still an amazing child. So after she left, my husband and I tried to go about our days as normal. We failed miserably. There was a lot of crying and hugging Jacob very tightly to us. He, of course, had no idea why we were so upset. All the reassurances in the world couldn't stop the feelings of guilt and grief that we were processing. Looking back, the only way I can describe it is we were really going through a mourning process. We tried to stay focused on Jacob's brightness and happiness, on how smart and energetic and happy he was. And we really had to consciously remind ourselves that this was not a matter of fault. We couldn't have made him autistic or not autistic any more than we could keep his blue eyes he was born with, which they turned hazel like my husband, so I'm a little upset about that. We still mourned for the child who could have had a different and less difficult life. And we really couldn't stop worrying about the challenges that Jacob would face in the future. But we resolved to take it one step at a time. So we decided to stick with KidSteps as our program to enroll him in. And the following Monday, we were introduced to our new 5-person team. We had Pat and Allison, who are special education teachers. We had Shannon, our speech therapist. Liz, our social worker and behavior analyst. And we kept Heather, our occupational therapist that we had been seeing. At first, it was pretty overwhelming because we went from seeing them every couple weeks to seeing them 4 times a week. So it took a lot of getting used to. However, our team is incredibly compassionate and encouraging, and we were able to trust them very, very quickly. During the first visit, the new team brought over a box of toys, which they affectionately call the autism box. And this was for Jacob and us to play with and develop his skills with. The box stayed in our home, so Jacob could go to it at any point, not just during visits. And it included things like flashcards and bubbles. You can see him playing with scarves from it at the bottom. It had books, and there's a large amount of stuff that was crammed into this box. What was really interesting is KidSteps found really, really creative ways of incorporating everyday objects to help Jacob really develop and learn new skills. They have also helped connect us to different things in the community, like they found us a free local play group so that Jacob could really work on his social skills with his peers. KidSteps also involves the parents in their team as well. It's very important for them to include us in everything that they do, and this is through playing with Jacob and conversations that we have with them. And they really work on using everyday routines in order to help Jacob learn and develop and nurture. So once a month, the whole team meets and we go over Jacob's progress for the previous month, and we also update any tasks for the next month. The typical visit, though, consists of 1 or 2 of the team members, and then one of us parents and Jacob. And we work on things by letting him really choose what he wants to do. So he gets many choices throughout the visits, and it's a really, really detailed process. But to simplify it, we have a list of tasks that we go over every 15 minutes, and we basically mark on what he's accomplished in that 15 minutes. KidSteps typically does this data themselves, but I really like to stay involved, so I asked them if I could do the data sheets myself while they were playing with Jacob, and I interacted with them as well. This really helped me learn what works and doesn't work for Jacob so I can continue his development when we're not in meetings. And it's really important that you guys know that Jacob has developed amazingly with all this intervention. So every child is different and the tasks vary greatly. So currently Jacob is working on sign language and eye contact. We work on his expressive and receptive languages, his cognitive functions like learning and problem solving. And we work on his social skills in the playgroup. And currently we're trying to get him to eat a more variety of foods because he likes hot dogs and chicken nuggets, and that's about it. So far, Jacob's progress has been really outstanding in just about every area that we've asked for help with. My husband even said that Kid Steps has been amazing. In 6 months, we went from being deeply worried about Jacob's future to being not so scared about it. So Jacob has come leaps and bounds. He's playing differently with toys, expressing his frustrations better without even hitting us, which is huge, by the way. I don't know how many of you have children, but hitting is big. He's making better eye contact, not just with us, he's doing it with strangers now. He's responding to his name more, even in crowded places like playgroup and restaurants. And he's identifying objects more, so he'll tell us to stop at stoplights and go when it's green, which is pretty annoying, but adorable at the same time. His biggest improvement, though, is his vocabulary. In November, he was saying maybe 5 different words. Now he's saying over 100 consistently. So Kid Steps' approach has been remarkably skillful and encouraging for him to finish tasks, but not to the point of forcing him to do them. So he chooses what he really wants to work on, and they increase his success by positive reinforcement and cheering him on. They don't force him to be normal, and they do things at his level of understanding. Like any child his age, it's impossible to avoid frustrations altogether, so Kid Steps will allow him to be frustrated, but also help him really learn how to express those frustrations in a safe and energetic way, so he's really able to be himself. They always check with us to make sure that we're okay with everything that they're doing as well. So Kid Steps really strives at every level to make everything fun and engaging and good for my son and us. So we're tremendously relieved by his progress. And if it wasn't for this early intervention, I truly don't believe that he would be the amazing, amazing child he is now. And Jacob isn't the only family that Kid Steps has helped. They are currently serving over 400 families in Connecticut, which is huge. So choosing Kid Steps is really one of the best decisions we could have ever made. I could go on and on and on, but I don't want to take up the rest of your night. So if you'd like to talk more, please don't hesitate to ask. And I really want to encourage you to help keep Kid Steps available for all of us who need them.